All right, well, it's time for this year's film reveal video for my trip to Zion National Park. And so I'm doing a little bit different this time. I have the camera situated directly over top of my light box. And I'm just gonna show the film on there so you'll see it as I see it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start out with the black and white. I had only one exposure. I should mention that I just got back from the trip about a week ago. And by now you guys will know how the trip turned out, but I'm just figuring it out. All right, so this is a scene that I photographed kind of near the end of the trip. I have this kind of cool log here. And the evening before, there was water flowing through here. And it's a little hard to tell based on the negative here, because I'm not quite used to it, but I do see that we have detail in dark shadows. It might be a little bright, but I think I got good detail there. I also shot that one on color neg, but seems to be pretty decent. Of course, I'll never know until I really get it scanned, but the challenge on this one is that I wanted to show, kind of have the eye so it kind of goes through the canyon here. But I was working with I had to stop the top of the frame right here, and because it got just, you don't see the canyon anymore beyond that. I wanted to show enough here, and had enough up here. I'm getting a little close there, but I don't know, looks decent. Looks to be sharp, no film pop or anything, so I'd say it's probably decent. All right, now that we're done with my one black and white photo, we'll look at the color neg. I have 9 sheets of color negative film. And many of these scenes are the same scenes I also photographed on slide film. I'll start with this guy right here. Actually, rather fittingly, this was from kind of near the end of the trip. Last day. So this is the area that I had photographed in years past, and kind of wish I had a little bit more on the right side, but I know there wasn't much more there. But I know that when I photographed this in years past, one of the things I really liked about this particular image was the way that had the green water in this and the glow over here. So I see some evidence of glow there and there. As far as wind movement, I think I might see a little bit right there, but it appears to be pretty decent. Appears to be a pretty good exposure. You darken some areas that truly are dark, but the exposure appears to be good. We'll see how that works out, but I think that it'll actually be balanced pretty well because this will balance this. And on this one, I focused right about here, about a third of the way in, and then I stopped down, and as much as I can tell, it looks like it's sharp, so it looks like that's technically a good shot. We'll just have to see how it is once I scan it. And then this is my second exposure of that scene. And one of them was shot with a little bit more glow than the other, and honestly I have no clue which one has more glow until I get it on the computer. But I do see that there is some wind movement there and there. So between the two exposures, the first one was a little bit better. Next up, so this is the scene that I photographed a few hours before that previous image I was showing you. And this is a scene that I had walked past many times, and I always thought was interesting, but these trees up and through here, they didn't show the best of fall color in years past. They got really thin. But this year, the color in the narrows was actually a little bit later than usual. And I wanted to anchor the foreground with this rock, have it balanced with this rock. The water flows in through here. And I was trying to figure out how much to the left or right I should have there, because the foreground and the top are pretty well set for the composition, but I wanted to make sure I showed this large rock here, because it kind of gives a sense of place. You get some reflections there, and this also kind of leads into the frame. But exposure looks to be good. I see no evidence of film pop. And again, this will be when I have two different glows. I suspect this might be the stronger glow because this area here looks a bit different. So this may have been one of my last exposures, but it looks like I have good detail throughout. And as far as wind movement, looks to be very calm. So that could be a cool photo. Definitely happy to see that, at least for now, technically it looks like it's in good shape. Here is the color version of that photo I shot. And what's interesting is that there's a little bit of leaves in here, which I guess I didn't even realize was there. But it's kind of funny because on the negative they show very green, whereas they're going to be yellows and oranges. And so this one is really bright back in here, but I have detail there. Dark, I have detail there. I'm not sure how this glow is going to actually show when I scan it, but there was just a very subtle glow back in there. But this is one of the scenes I was just kind of walking past it and said, hey, it's not too bad. So I look forward to seeing that one scanned because the log looked really cool, all these little rocks, different colors and stuff. And the reason I shot this one on Ektar is, well, I didn't have any Velvia with me, but also I think the scene, because of the contrast difference between there and there, I think this was definitely more of an Ektar photo. But it's a pretty strong composition. What's interesting is that this log crossing across here, it has a bit of a dynamic look to it as opposed to an obstructing look to it. But we'll see how it is actually when I get it scanned in. But so far I have a pretty good feeling for that. Here's my chaos shot. This actually looks really cool in negative. So this is an area I've returned to for several different years. My cat's making noises. I may need to help him. Can you not get in?
Oh, you can't get in. There you go.
Which makes you wonder. You're good there. All right. When my wife and I did remodeling in our house, we had one of the closets turned into a kitty cat restroom, and he'd gotten locked out. So I think all is well now. Okay, so back to the photo. So anyways, there's this maple that I found maybe 2 years ago. It's right at the foot of a big ponderosa pine. And so you have all this fallen needles and all kinds of stuff, pine cones. And then there's like this maple with this branch that leads down to the actual ground itself. And I know I'm not going to be tack sharp all the way through because that wasn't the goal. My main thing was to focus on this area here, and I'll lose it a little bit back there. But that looks really cool as a negative. And I think I'm sharp where I need it to be. But it's like the way it kind of flowed down into the scene there. I look forward to seeing that on slide film, because I did shoot it on both. But that's actually really cool looking as it is. Little fallen stars. So here's my other exposure of that scene. And again, I can't tell if this one has more or less glow than the other one. Let's look at wind movement. That looks very still. So I think that one will be pretty decent. Looks to be a good exposure. I have detail where I need it. Again, that'll be pretty interesting to see scanned. And no issues with film pop. Now, what I do notice is that my film, no, it's all good. It almost looked like it was sitting uneven in the holder, but no, that's even. But that looks like a good negative. This is a chaos scene. This is a chaos scene that I thought had a bunch of interesting elements to it. I was walking through the wash and I saw this scene, and there's this maple right over here that has kind of greenish yellowish leaves, and it's kind of coming out from these evergreens. So you got these dark greens and then like these sort of lemon lime colors here. Big pine tree back here, another maple. And what I found interesting was the way these walls right here kind of lead through. Remind me a little bit of Subway, and then this area back here has a subtle glow on it. But it's a chaotic scene, but it was one of those scenes where it makes me go on and kind of like walk through it. And we'll see how it turns out in the actual, when I get it scanned. But there's some other cool, interesting elements, like over here, all these roots and stuff. But this one appears to be sharp, which is good. I don't see any evidence of wind movement. One of my concerns was this bush right here. It's like this shrub, and it's kind of hanging over the edge. I know it's not going to be tack sharp, but it does not look bad. But yeah, that'll be interesting. Here's my second exposure. I like to shoot doubles a lot, but my second exposure on that same scene. And I think I used darn near the exact same exposure. And as far as tack sharp goes, probably from there to there, and then here you start to have a little depth of field to blur things out a little bit, which might give it a sense of depth. Looks like for the whole foreground area we're good. And for the leaves, looks like these leaves up through here are all sharp, and then you might be dropping off a little bit there, but again, that looks kind of cool. In this scene, I did put a pine cone right there, and everything else, I think I took one away from over here, but everything else is as it was. Just wanted to balance it a little bit. And this was one of the few, if possibly the only vertical photos I shot on the trip, so I guess I'll display it this way so you guys can see it. But it's a pine tree, which I know you gotta design in the fall to shoot fall color, and you shoot an evergreen. So, but it's these two trees, and they're kind of intertwined there, and they're growing in a wash right at the base of this sandstone. Well, this large sandstone area, and so it's got this sandstone at about a 45-degree angle. And what I liked was this little tree back here in conjunction with this, where it's almost as though it's like a mother and a father tree and like a little child tree. But that was kind of an interesting scene. But it appears to be sharp, as much as I can tell. It's really crazy actually looking at all the pine needles. But it looks to be sharp all the way through. That'll be interesting to see that one scanned, because this one was catching some reflected light. Probably more so, you see that right there and down that edge. And then just kind of madness down in the wash. But I like the way that that one came out as far as the composition. I was struggling with how far to move it left or right, but looks pretty good. So that is the end of my color neg. And that was 9 sheets. And now we're going to do the slide film. So this was an interesting scene. I saw this when I was kind of wandering through the wash. And what I found interesting was the mud was kind of becoming sand. So you have kind of this mixture of, dry and wet, and the kind of bluish rocks, and then the leaves. This one could use a little warming. I thought we were in a little bit of reflected light, but we were definitely in shade. But I mean, it's actually quite nice as it is because you have the color contrast, but this could actually use a little bit of warming to be even stronger. As far as sharpness, looks like I'm pretty darn good throughout. And curious how it views this way. That just feels upside down. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, just kind of randomness. This is one that reminded me a little bit of the Milky Way. This kind of diagonal streak with the stars represented by maple leaves and the little pebbles. But I think it kind of captures the kind of quiet side of Zion, in between the river running through there. I didn't do anything to this one as far as placing things. I think I may have removed one leaf that was over here or something like that, but all those leaves were there because they fell there. There's a tree right over here, but that is that's a cool shot. Very quiet, very calm. That's the sort of stuff that large format does really well with. All right, next up, same scene. My eyes might be tricking me, but this feels a little warmer. But it's the same scene shot at about the same time. Would have minded getting rid of that pine needle there, but that's just fine. It's also a little hard to photograph this sort of scene because my camera is facing downward. But man, looking at this thing, it's easy to trick my brain into thinking I'm looking at reality. It's one of the fun things about shooting slides. Exposure is really good. It's pretty easy to expose scene. All right, so here is that maple scene. And I have a good exposure. I'm bordering on being too bright, but I have a good exposure. I exposed it the way I did because there's this pine cone right here, which had some of the darker values in the scene. And then I was metering off this leaf right here, so that represents my darkest area. That'd be my brightest area. And I pretty much threaded the needle on it, though when I scan it, I know I'll probably want to darken things down a little bit. All the pine needles and pine cones and stuff is all wet because it snowed the day before. This area here attracts my attention a little more than I'd want, but this could probably be used just a little bit of warming as well. But it is very sharp. That one's pretty fun to look at. Chaos. It was really hard to photograph, but it turned out nice. And here's my second exposure. This one's a little bit warmer. I want to show you this because there was a cloud that had gone over. And maybe if I go like this, you'll see a little bit better. You can see how this one's a little bit warmer than this one. And there was a cloud that had gone over, and the cloud actually warmed things up a little bit because it caught some of the morning light. So I definitely prefer this one. And the exposure is a little bit better there too. And these were shot maybe 5-10 minutes apart. Yeah, that warmth is nice. Just catching those leaves as they're transitioning. Now what's also interesting is that this isn't quite the color the leaves were. The film had a little bit of a hard time with it. They look good this color, but they're actually a little bit more neon-y. And I think the film just couldn't do neon. And likewise, these greens here were a little bit more of kind of a neon green versus neon yellow. But it picked, good colors for it to be. It's nice. Simple and chaotic. Okay, this is one that my brain stopped working when I was shooting. I'm surprised it actually turned out. A little dark back in here. This is on a day I was just kind of wandering through the wash, trying to find something to photograph. And I found this scene, which was interesting, but I knew it'd be difficult because this area is so bright, and this area, by contrast, is rather dark. I didn't have reflected light, it was just kind of a cloudy day. So the foreground's kind of blah looking. It's not a bad photo though. Maybe it's a matter of balancing out the exposure a little bit, making this a little bit brighter, and then warming the whole thing up a tad. But definitely a matter of shooting chaos. And I shot 2 photos of this scene. I think one of them was horribly overexposed or double exposed or something weird. But one of them turned out, so at least I have that. But it appears to be sharp and everything. So it's all right. Definitely not the most powerful image I've ever shot, but here's the bad one. What's interesting is that, so this exposure actually here ended up being fine. This is overexposed. What happened on this one is I was trying to do a 1 second exposure, but the shutter on my lens, I set it for 1 second, but it hung open for 2 seconds. So added an extra stop of exposure, which is certainly needed for the top. So if I compare these guys here, let's make it the same. So my composition is slightly different too. That's right, because I had started unpacking my camera. But yeah, this top exposure is actually okay. It could be darker a little bit. We have detail, and this is too bright. But I don't think it's really an amazing shot anyways. That one's a little too dark, but it was a tough scene. Ektar would have been a bit better on it, but I don't think I'm going to plan on using that for anything. So here's the photo of the alcove. And I'm glad I shot it on color neg as well, because this is a little too much for slide film. We got detail in here, but we're a bit dark. And the water was bordering on being too bright. As far as composition, I could use a little less of the left side. So it's not quite, I really should have included a little bit more this way. It's not horrible though. I also shot it before the big glow. This one has movement on the tree, so it's not the greatest anyways. This may have been before the glow really started going. You can also see the water turns out really blue there. And that's something that happens a lot with Velvia. It's all right. Here's my other variation of that scene. And as far as leaf movement, it's a little bit, but not bad. But this might be one where I fall back on the Ektar. And also, to get a little more color out of here, I think that would help. But also, check this out. This rock right here was one of the rocks I was metering. That rock is borderline overexposed. I was pushing the limits. I put that rock on my spot meter at positive like 1.8. That water there was darn near positive 1.8, positive 2. This was about like negative 1.8. So I'm just barely able to get all that within the film. This is pretty dark up here. But this is why I like to shoot color neg and color slide. And what I'd be curious is, square works pretty well for that too. But I like that glow, but I don't know, we'll see. It's probably one for the color neg. All right, still actually have a lot of film here. So this is that scene that I photographed a little earlier. I can tell there's a little bit of glow going on because this rock is catching some light. But this was still before the glow really started going because it's still pretty cool in here. And as far as leaf movement, there's a hair of movement on this one right here. I was a little concerned about this one being a little heavy on this side because of the water. But I think on the color neg, which I shot later, this was before the glow really started getting going, but this right here started lighting up pretty good when the glow was going. This may have been one of my first exposures. It does capture kind of calm feeling of being in there, but I think this is one where Ektar is going to do better. My exposure is actually pretty ideal because if I'm any brighter on these rocks, I'm overexposed. I'm definitely dark on here. But it's a very honest view of what the narrows are like early in the morning. And it does look a bit like reality. Okay, so this was shot just a little bit later on, and the glow was developing a little bit more, but still this was before the glow started going because I wanted to shoot Velvia before the glow was going, and then Ektar after the glow. And so if you look between these two, a little more glow on this one, especially if you look at that area versus this area. So this was as the glow started to develop a little bit more. Let's take a look at those trees. They're very calm. This foreground one here is a little bit of a troublemaker, a little bit of movement, but that's fine. And if this warms up a little bit, it's probably fine, though in reality, I think it's going to be the slight glow of the Ektar that's going to make for the better exposure. Focus looks really good. And I exposed it pretty much perfectly as far as I couldn't go any brighter because then I would start losing detail on these rocks. I'm pushing it as is. And I still have detail on that dark wall there. That's a little dark, but that's where Ektar does well. The other area I was metering was right here. When I metered the scene, I metered the highlights here, and then the shadows, not fully under there, but the shadows kind of in here, averaged those, and then that ended up being a pretty good exposure. This was probably I don't know, like a minute or minute and a half or something like that. And sometimes people will talk about how, you know, they want to have texture in the water and stuff like that, but that's a little bit more of a digital thing. You really can't do that in a large format because shooting a 100, or in this case a 50 speed film, plus you have to double your exposure because of reciprocity. I did not use a polarizer, so that at least helped that. But it does have the look of reality of the narrows. This is the first photo from the trip. It's chaos. I could use a little bit of warming, though I do like how the branches go a little bit blue. But this tree was just like a flame in the canyon. And I really like the way that these leaves down here, they're quite contrasty as far as having lots of reds and yellows and, you know, all sorts of colors. I think it might be a little too chaotic even for me. But one thing that attracted me to the scene was the color contrast between this and that. And maybe what I should have done is shot it a little bit more wide open and to blur the background a little bit more. It's interesting. I mean, maybe there's some sort of square in here somewhere. This is using my 450 lens, which is my longer lens. But it's interesting. It's not I don't know, maybe it's one of those shots that the randomness will grow on me with time. Exposure is really good though. It's interesting. That was my first exposure for the trip. And here's my double of that. pretty much identical. Very sharp. Could use maybe a little warming, but not much, because I do want to maintain the blueness there, because the sky gives that. And to my eye, that was one of the things that caught my attention. That's one thing that film also shows a lot of. Shows the blues and the shadows. It's interesting. It's not my normal style, but it is quite interesting visually. So it'll be interesting to see how that one grows on me with time. Which way is up? Okay. This is one of the shots I've been wanting to do for a while, and this one is like sensory overload. So what I did learn is that the maples, they look really cool when they have just not a lot of leaves left on them. And especially it's the color contrast and also the contrast in texture. I really am digging this photo. So this is the maple on the east side, kind of in the washes. And off to the right side over here, out of frame, there was a lot more leaves, kind of more like what you see here, but throughout the whole tree. Left side was the same, but I like this middle area because they look like little stars in the sky. And then these winter branches that are kind of blue have kind of a lightning look. And I think what I set out to capture, I captured exactly what I wanted. It almost hurts my eyes to look at it. Because what's happening is that the warm colors are coming forward and the cool colors are going backwards. And it looks 3D. This is a really captivating image. This is the second photo I shot on the trip. I think it's because my brain is trying to understand it, because there's all kinds of optical illusions. And this is one where maybe it won't translate in print, but maybe it will. But it's almost like my brain's trying to figure out what way is up, what way is down. And so far from the trip, this is my favorite image. That is really, really cool. I'm really digging that. I'm gonna have double of that. There we go. I think the only difference between these two is I used a different aperture. I think I shot one at like f/72 and one at f/45. So I don't even know if I'll be able to tell the difference between them. This is weird, it looks like 3D. I'm guessing this is the f/72. A little bit more in focus. Though that is really cool. I'm very happy with that photo. That is so cool. I was curious how that one would turn out. There we go. Here's our leaf shot. I put the leaf there, I will admit to that. Though this leaf originated probably about 1.5 feet that way. What's interesting, this is not far from life size. Because those maple leaves in reality are probably about that big. But this was also my first day there. And I really liked as the mud was drying, had kind of a whipped sort of look to it. There's some areas a little lighter, some areas a little darker, and there's this beautiful reflected light coming from some sandstone that was kind of off on the slower edge on the other side of the wash. And so I knew that this leaf would catch some really nice light if I put it on the edge versus propped at a little bit of an angle. That's very pretty. Pretty much a perfect exposure, and gives me the feeling that I'm looking at reality. I've been wanting to get a photo like this for a while, and it's pretty cool. Definitely pretty happy with the way that turned out. It's interesting there's all kinds of movement through there. Very happy with that. All All right, I don't remember what we have left. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So this is that scene I was talking about earlier. Very subtle glow up there. Not a lot, but just very subtle. Borderline overexposed in the foreground. I'm good, but I'm borderline. And then here's that tree, that maple, that had some of the reds and yellows and greens. This is definitely a bit distracting here. This actually turns out to be not a big deal. That's fine. But this stuff here is a little bit distracting. But those washes are complete chaos. It's interesting. Definitely not my strongest of images, but it does very accurately portray the chaotic east side of the park at times. But that's pretty cool. And then here's my double of that. Looks to be the same exposure. Sometimes people ask me if I bracket my exposures, and I usually don't, just because I can usually get the exposure pretty much right on. I just shoot doubles for if something happens in developing or if there's any problems. And if in doubt, I'll shoot Actar. So here's that tree shot. First I'll look at it this way, and looks like we are very sharp. I'm pushing the latitude of the film a little bit, but I get everything I need there. This could use a little bit of a warming because we're getting a little strong on the blues and areas, but when I was metering this one, this area right here was quite bright, but I'm okay there. And I was also trying to make sure I had detail in the dark areas. But I found the mid-ground between those two areas of brightness and darkness, and found an exposure that works. So this one could be warmed up a little bit because to the eye, it was actually quite warm. The film sees it quite cool. So this one actually should have a kind of a very orangish, kind of tangerine-ish kind of light in through here, with just a little bit of a bluish in areas. And also if I warm it up, it'll kind of pop the greens a little bit more. Sometimes people ask me if I carry warming filters with me in the field, and I don't, because I'm just going to scan it so I can warm things up a little bit in post. But it's interesting. Composition turned out basically the way I wanted it to. And looks like Velvia did just fine. And then here's my double of that. What's interesting is that this one looks like the light's a little bit different, even though I don't think anything was changing. Maybe I'm just making stuff up. It's basically the same. That's kind of trippy looking. I guess our eyes just kind of get used to stuff at times. But yeah, they'll definitely need a little bit of a warming up. And I still got more. This is an interesting tree that I had found. I could do without this area over here. That tree really comes through in a way I was hoping that would kind of disappear a little bit more back there. But yeah, big ponderosa pine, draped in maples. And although it's quite good, it's not quite what I was hoping it would be. Maybe it's because I need to darken it down a little bit. Because with Velvia, you have to expose as bright as you can, then you darken it down in post, because you want to make sure you don't lose your shadows. So I'm a little bit brighter there than I'd want. But I feel like it should almost be cropped a little bit, like right in there. I almost feel like the trees are not interacting as well with the trunk as I would like. But maybe I'm just being picky. But those trees are nice. And this is my final exposure. Same scene. This one appears to be a hair brighter. And no leaf movement or anything. And maybe it's a decent shot. But I do wish it was... I was really trying to figure out how to work with that side where the other tree was. It appears to be, I think it might be the same exposure. But if I did something like, maybe like that. I like to keep the 8:10 aspect ratio. Maybe it's fine. But, so of all the pictures of the trip, I'm gonna go back to that other shot. That, I think, is my favorite. Because it almost as though it plays tricks on the eyes. It kind of moves. It's a very cool shot. So, well, thanks for watching my film reveal. And I guess the good thing is that I didn't have any cases of film pop, which is where the film moves during an exposure. So I think that'll be my topic for my my weekly video this week. But definitely very, very happy to see the results, and we'll see what happens from my next trip. So thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you around next trip. If you love this content and want to help support my journey, you can do so by subscribing to my YouTube channel, telling a friend, or sending a contribution of just $24 a year via PayPal. I depend on the generous support of people like you to produce this ad-free content. Thanks in advance for your support.